Today, President Trump is hosting in the White House the new German Chancellor Merz, and they're talking about a range of issues, whereas Germany continues to want to try and push more and more support for Ukraine, but also looking at other issues, especially related to NATO. And it's the first time the two leaders have had a chance to get to meet, because apparently they don't have any personal history before. They hadn't met in the past. And so now here in the White House is Chancellor Merz. Now, we already had scheduled today to have Patrik Baab on our show to talk about some of these issues. And Mr. Baab is the author of the best-selling book On Both Sides of the Front, where he shares his experience of traveling into the Donbass. He worked many years as editor for the North German Broadcasting Company, NDR, and was also a lecturer at 2 different universities. Herr Baab, willkommen Sie.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Daniel, thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, listen, we have a lot of things to talk about here today, and we're really eager to get some of your views from a German perspective on some of these issues. But because there's a live broadcast going on right now in the White House, we're going to take just a minute or two and see if anything of interest comes up right now. Let's go ahead and play that live.
General Kane is going to be picking somebody with our. We'll be checking him out, seeing, but he wanted that person, a certain person, and we said no. And, I can understand why he's upset. Remember, he was here for a long time. You saw a man who was very happy when he stood behind the Oval desk. And even with the black eye, I said, you want a little makeup? We'll get you a little makeup. But he said, no, I don't think so, which is interesting and very nice. He wants to be who he is, so you could make that statement too, I guess. Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we will anymore. I was surprised because you were here. Everybody in this room practically was here as we had a wonderful send-off. He said wonderful things about me. You couldn't have nicer, said the best things. He's worn the hat. Trump was right about everything. And I am right about the great, big, beautiful bill. We call it a great, big, beautiful bill because that's what it is. And again, biggest tax cuts in history, biggest economic development moves anywhere. We've never done anything
Gary,
like
we'll
it.
take a little bit longer to see if the next question has to do with
And I don't
Chancellor.
know if you've seen the numbers, but the numbers came out. Even the CBO, which is run by Democrats, said that we're going to be doing. I'd like you to discuss it. The 2.8 trillion that CBO. This is a group of people that are Democrats. They're very hostile to us. They just came out with phenomenal numbers, what it does. You want to mention that, Scott?
Yes, sir. So what we've seen is we keep hearing from the CBO that there's going to be a large deficit from the bill, which we disagree with, but using the CBO scoring, they came out and scored the tariff revenue. We think it'll be the minimum of 2.8 trillion over the 10-year window, which actually puts the bill in surplus if you include the tariff revenue, which they won't do.
It gives you a tremendous surplus, but we're not allowed to use that. For some reason, they say scoring. Nobody knows what scoring means. Maybe a couple of people, but nobody. Somebody sits in the background. They say, well, we're not going to allow that. They're not allowing other things that we have that are tremendously profitable for our country. But if you saw the other day, CNBC, they came out with numbers, and the people
Gary,
in
let's
the show,
go ahead
very
and just
good
pull
people.
out of there. That we'll stick with it, Gary. If you can monitor that, if anything does of value come in later on, and if you need to break in, feel free to do that. Patrik, I want to jump on that issue they're talking about there about the tariffs, because that's apparently one of the things on Chancellor Merz's agenda, to talk about the tariffs and to try to get those negotiated in some kind of a good way. What is his position on those tariffs that are being put on by the United States?
Well, I think Mr. Merz and Mr. Trump will have 4 topics. But first of all, they have to find a personal relationship. And I know that Mr. Merz did not have a personal relationship to the Trump team. He tried to find an access to the Trump team, and he asked for help by German businessmen to build a bridge to the Trump team. I think it worked, and now they will have 4 topics. First of all, this is Ukraine war. The second topic will be the tariffs. Then the question of the freedom of speech in Europe, and especially in Germany. and NATO financial structure. That's the fourth point. And they will compromise in 2 points: the tariffs. So they will find in some way a compromise, and Merz will promise to buy more weapons for the German army in the United States and at the United States military industrial complex. That's a promise. And so Merz wants to bring his own country and the German government back into the game around the Ukraine war. And they will compromise in the point of the NATO financial structure. The compromise could be the European countries and European NATO members will pay 3.5% of the gross domestic income for military functions and military means, and 1.5% for military infrastructure. This could be a way, and it will be a big effort for European countries. And for Germany, this means social cuttings and cutting in the health sector, social security, and all those things. There are big differences at the moment in the questions of the Ukraine war. And this is a main point after these big attacks of the Ukrainians on Russian airfields. So at the moment, the conversation between Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin shows that both want to find a way to de-escalate. And the Europeans want to escalate because they want to get back into the game. They want to sit on the table, on the negotiation table. That's the point. And they want to find out if there is a possibility to have part on the exploitation of the Ukraine resources and the Black Earth. They want to do something good for their own economy, and they didn't want to leave the deals to the Americans. So that's the main point. So, but overall, I think Chancellor Merz will present himself as a very model student because the Americans want to go back from Europe and reinforce their pivot to Asia, because China is, in the American point of view, the most dangerous enemy. And so they want to Europeanize the Ukraine conflict. And there is a competition between 4 European countries who will be the leader in this game. Poland, Germany, the United Kingdom, and France. And Germany want to get the leader in this deal. They want to get the first vessel of the United States. And so Mr. Merz will present themselves as a kind of model student.
Well, in fact, and that on that point there has been some recent comments by the chief of the German defense, General Breuer, who said that just a couple of days ago that there is a great threat against NATO from Russia.
How serious is the threat facing NATO right now from the east, from Russia?
I think it's a very serious threat. I've never seen a situation like this in my 40 years of service. It's really coming to a point where I must say we have to be prepared, and we have to be prepared to be ready to, of course, being able to defend ourselves, but at the same time to do deterrence, just to show Russia that it's not easy to have an attack against NATO territory. So we must be able to fight tonight. And for this fight tonight, we are, of course, we are ready because we are soldiers, we are trained, we are educated, and we have weapons. So therefore, we can take this fight tonight.
So let me ask you a question. First of all, he claims at the beginning of that soundbite we just played that in his 40 years in service or whatever it was, this is the biggest threat he sees coming from Russia. But I served, and you're not a spring chicken either, so you have some history here. I served in the U.S. Armed Forces in Germany it's back as far as the middle 80s and early 90s. And that threat that was on the other side of the line, which when I first started there was the DDR. It was actually still East and West Germany, and there was a pretty big threat then. So what do you make of him saying that this apparently is even bigger than that?
I don't think so, but I know this way of thinking very well. This thinking of Mr. Breuer is part of the so-called security dilemma. Every side feels threatened by the other side. And the only way to find a bridge is to negotiate on that. And the wrong way is to boost military spending. This is the wrong way. It's just what Mr. Breuer wants to do. So we have to keep in mind that Ukraine war is a war of the United States and NATO allies against the Russian Federation on Ukraine's soil. And from the Moscow perspective, this is a war of survival, because NATO came in the last 30 years too close to the Russian border. And they have the fear that NATO missiles can reach Moscow in less than 5 minutes. And that's a problem. So Russia has three main goals in this war. The first goal is to avoid NATO expansion further to east. They want a neutral Ukraine. They want to bring up shelter for the Russian minority in Ukraine. This point changed. It was at the beginning of the war, and now we see that Putin and other guys said, so every negotiation has to be respect the reality on the ground. That means the Russian Federation wants to get those 4 oblasts in eastern Ukraine, Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, and Cherson, including Crimea. That's very clear. Crimea will stay Russia. And currently they hear demands that they want a security zone, whatever that means. This is very open. I think it will be in the north of Ukraine, in the region of Sumy and Kharkiv. And the third point is the Moscow guys want a regime change in Kiev, because the regime in Kiev is, after the coup of the Maidan and since the coup of the Maidan, dominated by ultra-nationalist and neo-Nazi forces around Mr. Zelensky. And this is unacceptable for Moscow. But this is not aggressive to NATO. Putin made very clear several times that he did not want to attack NATO countries. And what he explained to Mr. Trump in this phone conversation, in the recent phone conversation, was that there will be a hard Russian answer, but only against Ukraine territories and facilities, not against NATO countries. But we both guys knew exactly that the only way to make this blue against the Russian military infrastructure, nuclear infrastructure, what made it possible was the just-in-time information and the participation on information from NATO satellites. There is no other way. But Putin did not respond on the same level. The Russian Federation will respond against Ukraine territory. So there is no threat against NATO, but there are a lot of provocations against the Russian Federation from the NATO side. We have to make very clear that Russia went back since 1990. They allowed the German reunification. They allowed the NATO membership of Poland and all these other countries. But now Ukraine is a red line. And I think the only way to find a possibility and a bridge to peace is to accept this red line.
And it doesn't appear that we're moving in that direction. And one of the other things that General Breuer mentioned there is that he said, explaining why they needed to build up the German military, he said because of a buildup on the Russian side first.
What we see at the moment is that Russia is building up their forces to an enormous extent. We see that they're producing approximately 1,500 main battle tanks every year. And out of this,
the German armed forces right now, are they going to be ready to fight Russia in just 4 years from now?
No, it's absolutely not possible that German military could fight Russia in this time slot. It's impossible. So they have to reinvent their military infrastructure, and now we're in the middle of the security dilemma. So Russia reinforced its military because of the war in Ukraine. They have 640,000 men under weapons in Ukraine at the moment because they want to reach their goal in Ukraine, and Russia is preparing for a war against NATO because this war is not an unprovoked war, and it was not an unprovoked Russian attack. This was provoked for a long time by NATO expansion to the east. And that's the point. And we have to keep in mind the prehistory of this war in Ukraine. That's the main point.
And so apparently there are others in NATO who are very excited about these German comments here, because earlier today there was a meeting of the NATO Council where they're looking to expand and significantly increase the amount of money they spend.
Letting them fight for a while.
Oh, hang on. We'll look something at them.
Pulling them apart. And I gave that analogy to Putin yesterday. I said, President, maybe you're going to have to keep fighting and suffering
Folks, this
a
is
lot
live
because
coming
both
from the White
sides
House.
are suffering before you pull them apart, before they're able to be pulled apart. But it's a pretty known analogy. You have two kids, they fight. Sometimes you let them fight for a little while. You see it in hockey. You see it in sports. The referees let them go for a couple of seconds, let them go for a little while before you pull them apart. And maybe, and I said it, and maybe that's a negative because we're saying go, but a lot of bad blood. There's some bad blood between the two. I have to deal with it, and the Chancellor has to deal with it. It's incredible. The level of, there's a great hatred between those two men, but between the warring parties, great hatred.
Also, you say and believe apparently that there's no immediate peace.
What?
That there is no immediate peace. There will be no.
Well, I can't. I'd love to have immediate if I could.
But why?
If I could, but we don't have immediate. You know, it's like I'd love to have that. I'd like it to start right now. We would leave a room if we knew the war could end. We'd say, forget about you guys. Forget about trade, right?
Yeah.
We'd say, let's go settle it. There's some additional fighting that's going to go on. You know, he attacked and they attacked pretty harshly. They went deep into Russia, and he actually told me. I mean, I made it very clear. He said we have no choice but to attack based on that, and it's probably not going to be pretty. I don't like it. I said, don't do it. You shouldn't do it. You should stop it. But again, there's a lot of hatred, and you know, I'm very proud of the fact that with India and Pakistan, I was able to stop that. And those are nuclear powers. And that was getting close to being out of hand. And I spoke to some very talented people on both sides, very good people on both sides. And I said, you know, we're dealing with you on trade, Pakistan and India right now. I said, we're not going to deal with you on trade if you're going to go shooting each other and whipping out nuclear weapons that maybe even affect us. Because, you know, that nuclear dust blows across oceans very quickly. It affects us. And I said, if you're going to do that, we're not going to do any trade deals. And you know what? I got that war stopped. Now, I hope we don't go back and we find out that they started, but I don't think they will. They were both good. They were well represented. I want to congratulate both countries because, as you know, the leader of India, who's a great guy, was here a few weeks ago. We had some great talks. We're doing a trade deal. And Pakistan, likewise, they have very strong leadership. Some people won't like when I say that, but, you know, it is what it is. And they stopped that war. Now, am I going to get credit? I'll never get credit for anything. They don't give me credit for anything, but nobody else could have done it. I stopped it. I was very proud of that. I wish we could do the same thing with Ukraine and Russia. And at some point it'll happen. I believe that. And if it doesn't happen, or if I see somebody's out of line, if Russia's out of line, you'll be amazed how tough. Remember this. They like to say that I'm friends with Russia. I'm not friends with anybody. I'm friends with you. I'm not friends with that. I want the right thing to happen for our country, for everybody, for humanity. But I'm the one that stopped the pipeline. It's called Nord Stream 2. Until I came along, nobody ever heard, not one person in this room ever heard of Nord Stream 2. You probably did, yes, because it went to Germany. He's the only one that
this was a mistake.
But I stopped it. I stopped it. Yeah, and you've said that openly.
Yeah.
It was a mistake because, and I used to go with Angela. I'd say, well, wait a minute. We're spending all this money to defend you against Russia, and then you're giving Russia billions of dollars a month. What kind of a deal is that? You know, which was... but you said it better than anybody else. I appreciate it. But I'm the one that stopped it. And that was the biggest economic development job, if you want to call it that, in the history, think of it, in the history of Russia. That was a massive, it's the biggest pipeline in the world. Going to go all over Europe, not only to Germany. You know, they were Germany, but then they were branching off all over to Europe. Nobody ever heard of, not one person of you heard of it. And I stopped it. It was dead. And then they say, I'm friends with Putin. I got along with him. He respected me, I respected him. It would have never happened. But I stopped Nord Stream 2. When Biden came in, almost the first week, he approved it. He let it be built. And then they say that I wasn't tough on Russia. Putin said to me, you know, you're not tough on Russia. You stopped the biggest, most important job we've ever done. You stopped it. And Biden came in and he let it be built. And I'll tell you what, I'll never forget the day I had it totally stopped. They weren't building. They gave up on it. They weren't able to. And then Biden came in and he let him build. I couldn't believe it. Okay, one or two questions more, please. Any questions? Any question for the Chancellor?
Yes. Continue.
Go ahead for the Chancellor.
That would be one.
I like his answers much better.
Will you continue to support Ukraine?
Yeah, I'm
good
with
question
Ukraine.
here.
We just signed a big deal on rare earth with Ukraine, and we want to. I want to. You know what? I'm for stopping killing. Really, that's what I'm for. Again, a war that would have never started, should have never started. I want to see the killing stop. We spent $350 billion, much more than Europe, but Europe spent a lot also. I mean, they spent way over $100 billion.
Yeah.
So you're talking about close to $500 billion went into that whole thing. And it's not even the money. And I know with you too, it's a lot of money, but it's the death that's being caused. We went to the Middle East. I went last week to the Middle East. We took in $5.1 trillion. That's many, many times. That's 30, 40 times, 50 times more than what we're talking about. It's think of that, $5.1 trillion of investment with one trip that lasted 4 days. So it's not the money. It's a little bit of money, but not the money, the big thing. The big thing is the death. The death of, and really the decimation. You've lost a whole culture. You know, Ukraine had the most beautiful turrets. They call them turrets, the little towers, beautiful towers, the most beautiful in the world. They're all now laying on their side.
Let's go ahead and pull on out of there now. He's starting to ramble like he sometimes does on there. But you know, he still says he wants the war to be over, but you know, we haven't really taken any action. And he talked to you there a second ago about, he reiterated that he talked to Putin, who said, yes, something big is going to come. What is your sense of, just on that subject there, while we're still talking about it, what is your sense of what Russia may do in response based on that conversation?
So it's interesting to hear that. It's the first time I hear that, and Russia will respond. I think part of the phone conversation of Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin was to give a go for Oreshnik attacks against Ukraine infrastructure. And I think this will happen in the next days. But Mr. Trump sees those things like a businessman, a New York real estate broker. And he wants to do something for the American middle class because his voters are in the middle class of the United States. And now he has to deliver jobs and social welfare, a bit more for his own country. And that's the problem. So he has different strategies. The taxes on the one hand. The second was, he told us in this discussion, to cut a Nord Stream pipeline, which also Mr. Biden in the end did. I think this was something Mr. Biden did. So the Europeans have to buy the real expensive American gas.
Yep.
And this makes their own European economy less competitive. And the third strategy is of Mr. Trump. The Europeans have to buy more weapons in the United States. They have to militarize their own societies and to spend much more money for the industrial military complex, of course, of the United States. And Mr. Trump wants to make deals with Mr. Putin because this looks like a good business. He don't want to leave Ukraine as a loser. That's the main point for him. So Ukraine should pay the disaster. I think he will bring the EU under pressure to implement, to accept Ukraine as a member of the European Union. And then all the disaster and the cost of the disaster will be paid by German taxpayers.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think Trump is eager to do for that very reason. And I don't want to run back here in the time we have left because of it has effect both on Germany as well as the NATO alliance, and that has very much to do with money. Here is Mark Rutte from earlier this morning talking about how the cost for NATO is about to go way up for everybody.
That will be a considerable extra investment. And this is why I predict that in The Hague we will decide on a much higher spending target for all the nations in NATO. Because we have to invest in our air defense systems, we have to invest in our, let's say, long-range missiles, we have to invest in our maneuverable land formations, command and control systems. All of this has to happen. And these mean huge investments. We need all over NATO territory. And by the way, doing this will also equalize what we are spending with what the United States is spending. We, Canada and Europe, equalizing with the US. And we know this is important because we want a fairer NATO where all our allies spend the same.
And right after that, there was a meeting with Secretary Hegseth, who put a figure and a percentage figure on how much more that would be.
Nobody has done more, I would argue. And if you just look in plain speak at the commitments and the budgets of NATO countries, then President Trump to restore NATO as an alliance. He did it in his first term, saying, you can't freeload, you need to spend, you need to be a part of that commitment. European countries stepped up. Now we're seeing even more so with even higher targets that Ambassador Whitaker and the Secretary General have set. We're talking about capabilities today, and that's important. You got to know what you're spending it on. And then that's going to be reflected, we believe, and the reason I'm here is to make sure every country in NATO understands every shoulder has to be to the plow. Every country has to contribute at that level of 5% as a recognition of the nature of the threat.
Okay, so that is a pretty big number. There has been some people alluding to a potential 5%, but now you hear explicitly from the U.S. Secretary of Defense that every shoulder is going to be to the plow, he said. So he's expecting all 31 other members to reach this 5%. But the question is, can they?
That's impossible because military spending of 5% of the gross domestic product would mean half of the German state budget and the French state budget and the British state budget as well would be brought into security and military expenses. This is impossible. So it would be to cut away all social expenses. So it's not possible. So, but they will find a compromise below that level. For example, as German Foreign Secretary Wadefuhl said some days ago, 3.5% military expenses and 1.5% expenses for military useful infrastructure. This could be a way, and I think they will find a deal like that.
But even that, I mean, even just the 3.5%, what is Germany now? It's under 2%, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, that would be an enormous increase over the current budget, which is what it's been for quite some time. How many years, as far as you understand, would it take for Germany to even get up to that level?
I think 3 to 5 years would be enough. It would be a fast militarization of the German society, social cuttings all over the map in every field of social spending, and they will cut in the infrastructure which is not military helpful as well. This is a complete change of German society. We will get from a social welfare state to a militarized state.
And will the people be willing to make that change? Do they recognize a threat?
So I think the German middle class is sleeping, and the German middle class did not want to oppose those ideas. And the political elites will do what they want. That's the situation in Germany. We are today, this is a difference to the United States, we are a country without opposition. And so the show will go on.
Wow. So, but the expectation, or probably the result, is that the people would at some point wake up, because they will find out they don't have as many of these social welfare benefits that they have currently enjoy now, and it seems at some point they may start to get unhappy about that. How does that work in the German political system?
Yeah, currently the government and the political elites of the SPD-CDU coalition, as well as the Green Party and the Liberals, are very successful. The political establishment in Germany is very successful in suppressing opposition positions, the positions of critics and the position of dissidents. They are spreading fear by bringing opponents under pressure in the society. So everybody today tries in Germany to keep his mouth shut. This is a dangerous development, a dangerous process, and Vice President Vance mentioned that at the Munich Security Conference, and I think he was completely right. So opponents like me and dissidents like me are really under pressure today. With the 17th sanction package of the EU, for the first time, 2 German journalists living in Russia were sanctioned. And they cannot do anything against that. And this is against, in the United States, against the First Amendment. Is it against the German Grundgesetz? And this is against all democratic rules. And so this is only the beginning. And I think the American government should help in this point. And I hope that this will be a topic in the conversation, in the discussion between Mr. Merz and Mr. Trump. Then we are in Germany today on the very edge of the beginning of a new dictatorship. of the ruling political establishment against their opponents.
And what about, I mean, speaking of their opponents, what about Alternative für Deutschland, the AfD, that has been, at least over the last several years, has been growing? Will this kind of pressure increase support for them, or will it actually minimize them?
No. This is also a dangerous process. The pressure against dissidents and opposition leaders and opposition meanings is a fortune for the AfD, and the AfD will get stronger and stronger. And I think, well, the AfD is a party who wants to spend more for the military sector. They spoke of 5% as well, as the United States government wants. And on the other hand, they are supporting Mr. Trump in finding a way to peace with Russia. And this is the reason G.D. Vance supported at Munich Security Conference the AfD. He spoke of freedom of speech, and he spoke, he mentioned that not the Russian Federation is the greatest threat, but the pressure against freedom of speech is the greatest threat in Europe. So,
and how were J.D. Vance's comments received in German public across the board, since a relatively small percentage actually supports the AfD, and since it seemed to favor the AfD? How did that make the non-AfD Germans feel?
I have to say I welcomed this speech of J.D. Vance, but there was an outcry in the whole mainstream media in Germany against J.D. Vance, because they don't see that and they support the government. As in most countries, the mainstream press is supporting the government, and this is a problem as well. So the future, I expect, is, so the AfD will be transformed in a transatlantic way to a vassal party of the United States. And after the next elections in 4 years, we may see a coalition between the conservative Christian Democrats and the AfD leading the country. And that will be the outcome. And the show will go on as we saw it these days.
Another question about how things are received. That was, you talked about the Vice President J.D. Vance. Well, also the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, was asking what I think was probably a question on many people's mind, that if he's sitting there telling all these countries in NATO that they got to reach 5%, somebody's going to go, yeah, what about your side?
Mr. Hegseth, the United States presently spends 3.4% of its GDP on defense. You're telling everyone else to spend 5%.
I don't think anyone's calling into question the United States of America's investment on defense, especially when it pertains to NATO, the investments that we've made there, the spending we've made in Ukraine. The issue is not whether America will step up. We've stepped up. President Trump's spending $1 trillion in the next budget, proposing 13% increase, historic investments in our southern border, Golden Dome, advanced technologies, F-47. We're leading the way. The question is, will our allies step up the way we need them to? Because considering the threats in the world today, they have to. We all have to live in history together.
What if they don't?
It's not over.
What if they don't? Would you ever consider withdrawing the United States from NATO?
That's not what we're here to discuss. What we're here to discuss is that NATO countries, when we heard that in there, it was actually very heartening to listen to all the countries step up and say, we hear you, we all need increased capabilities, we all need to spend more. Thank you, President Trump, for reviving this alliance.
So how's that going to be received? Because he basically says, yeah, be quiet. We're not going to spend 5%. 3.5% is enough for us, but I want everybody else at 5%. How is that being received?
Yeah, it's just it's just a way to deal with summaries. In the end, they will have 5% on the paper, but in reality, they will have 3.5% of the gross domestic product, and the rest will be infrastructure expenses and all that. So they will find a deal, I'm sure. They welcome what Hegseth said, and this is the easiest problem they have. the hardest problem is how to deal with the Ukraine war. That's the point.
Yeah, and that is something that no one's figured out in 3.5 years. In the last few minutes that we have here, I want to shift over to a slightly different topic that has a lot of interest or a lot of involvement with the German side, the German government. On May 27th, Chancellor Merz had made a statement that raised a lot of eyebrows, both in Europe, United States, and in Israel.
Is this moment a turning point in relations between Israel and one of its closest allies?
What the Israeli army is now doing in the Gaza Strip, I no longer understand, frankly, what its objective is. To cause such suffering to the civilian population, as has increasingly been the case in recent days, can no longer be justified as a fight against Hamas terrorism. When lines are crossed where international humanitarian law is now really being violated, then Germany, the German Chancellor, must also say something about it.
So I wonder, just for our American audience especially, if you can say or explain a little bit about why that was really an eye-opening thing, because so far, because of the history with the Holocaust, et cetera, that Germany has been almost afraid to say anything negative at all about Israel. And how big of a change was this?
Well, it is good to hear these words from a German chancellor, because this is a step forward. But it doesn't fit the reality. The reality is just an ethnical cleansing of the Gaza Strip. This is what we have to face. So I think the motivation of Chancellor Merz is tactical. He wants to avoid that Germany and the German government will be charged by the International Court of Justice as a supporter of a genocide and mass killings. He wants to avoid that. So he makes a step forward. But it is, well, you mentioned that, for Germans, a really difficult situation. And, well, the right of existence of the state of Israel must be very clear for me, because my family was personally deeply involved in Nazi dictatorship. And I cannot be so strong, but I have to say this is a genocide, and we need more words and we need steps. And the best step would be to stop weapons shipping to Israel. That's the point. Let's see action and not words.
And in light of that, was the 27th of May where he made that. And I believe it was earlier today in Berlin, the foreign minister for Israel came and had a joint or had a meeting, and then there was a joint press conference between the two afterwards. I felt it interesting, and I felt it important to point out here that when you see the Israeli foreign minister, Sar, actually explain his side, pretty much he's saying everything is everybody else's fault.
80 years after the Holocaust, anti-Semitism, unfortunately, has spread across the world, especially in Europe. 80 years after the Holocaust, the Jewish state is under an open threat to eliminate it. Hamas and the Houthis, Hezbollah, and above all, Iran, openly act to eliminate us. Yet, there are those who seek to turn the victim into the aggressor. Let me be clear. Hamas is the one solely responsible for the beginning of this war and also for its continuation. Hamas initiated this war. Only Hamas is responsible for the suffering of both Israelis and Palestinians.
In the interest of being accurate and honest, I certainly take issue with his claim, because he makes a statement here that Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Iran are all allied against him and trying to destroy them. No mention being of the fact that Israel has attacked and significantly degraded all of those people, all about their, what I consider from a military perspective, a gross overreaction against a legitimate their legitimate ability to defend themselves after the 10/7 terrorist attacks against Israel. They had every right to respond, but they had to do it right and within international law. And the way they have done it has just exploded the whole region here. And for him to claim that all these people are against him for no reason, I just don't think is very accurate.
Yes, this is a typical strategy of propaganda of the Netanyahu government. They state that every critique at the Netanyahu government and the Israeli strategy against Gaza is anti-Semitism. And this is a big difference. Anti-Semitism means to hate somebody because it's ethnic situation.
Yeah.
And critique at the government of Israel is a complete other thing. I can criticize the government of Israel without being an anti-Semite.
Right.
And that's the main point. And we have to keep that apart, both things. And the Israeli government tries for propaganda reasons to mix up those things.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people will. And so I was real interested after I heard that to hear what the German foreign minister, Vadeful, would have to say afterwards. In the clip I'm about to show here, prior to this segment here, he was saying lots of correct things, and he was saying like the Israeli side is going too far. The people in Gaza are suffering. We have to have a two-state solution and all this kind of stuff. But then I think he said something that probably the Israeli foreign minister would be happy to hear, because when it came to action, here's what he said.
Wir wollen für Israel eine gute Zukunft unter Nachbarn, mit denen Israel friedlich Seite an Seite lebt. Deshalb sollte die historische Chance, die Beziehungen zu Israels Nachbarn zu normalisieren, aus unserer Sicht jetzt mutig ergriffen werden. Eine Anerkennung Israels durch Saudi-Arabien oder Syrien wäre ein kaum zu überschätzender Beitrag zur Sicherheit Israels und zur Stabilität im ganzen Nahen Osten. Ähnliches gilt für das Verhältnis Israels zu den Palästinensern. Nach meiner Überzeugung ist eine Zwei-Staaten-Lösung die einzige realistische Perspektive, mit der Israelis und Palästinenser in Zukunft Seite an Seite in Sicherheit und in Würde leben können und die einzige Chance auf nachhaltigen Frieden in der Region. Für uns ist deshalb aber auch klar, dass dieser Prozess in Verhandlungen zwischen Israel und den Palästinensern abgeschlossen werden muss, bevor wir einen Staat Palästina anerkennen können. Dafür werben wir auch unter unseren europäischen Partnern und Freunden und meinen, dass eine jetzige Anerkennung des Staates Palästina ein falsches Zeichen wäre.
So for those who may have had a hard time reading the text at the bottom of that, the translation, he on the first part said that he wants the basically what Trump has started with the Abraham Accords. He wants to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia and Israel and Syria, which is something Israel really wants. So he said Germany supports it. And then the second part, he says that, yeah, we support a two-state solution, but we don't think it should happen until Israel and Palestine get together and have a conversation. And to recognize it before that would be counterproductive, i.e., since Israel has absolutely said they have no intention of ever having a two-state solution, all they have to do is just not talk to the Palestinians, and therefore Germany will never pressure them to do so, to have a two-state solution. So how do you interpret all that out of German politicians?
I hear those words. I hear his words, but I don't believe him, because this is very tricky, as you mentioned. So I think the two-state solution is the only possible solution on the long run. And this fits all declarations of the United Nations of the recent years, of the recent decades as well. But to find a two-state solution, it is the only way will be to bring Israel under pressure and not the Palestinians under pressure. And the pressure can come from the United States of America, from the European Union, and especially from Germany by cutting the weapons shipping, for example, to bring Israel under pressure, because there are a lot of strong forces inside Israel who don't want a two-state solution. They want expressively an ethnical cleansing. And so this is not the way. The way would be to recognize a Palestinian state, and then both sides can negotiate, and they have to negotiate under the pressure of the international community. This is the only way to find a peace solution for the Middle East and to find a two-state solution. But we both know that will not happen in the next years.
Yeah, and I think I agree with your position that really I think you can argue that the United States and Germany in particular are the two states that have the best chance to actually put any real pressure on Israel to be able to do this. And absent that, there seems to be, I agree, I think there's no chance that Israel will change anything because nobody else is going to bring that pressure that's going to make any kind of a change.
I think so, yes, I agree, absolutely.
And so let me ask real quick, and in the last few minutes we have here, what is the view, and has it changed any since October 2023 inside Germany of the view of either Israel or the Palestinians? Has it shifted in any way?
I didn't understand the question, so sorry for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Has the viewpoints within German society on Israel and on the Palestinians, has it changed any since the terrorist attack of 2023 and the way Israel has gone about it, or has it been kind of the same?
I think the German public has accepted double standards. In the Ukraine war, there's the majority supporting the government to continue the war against Russia as an attacker. And they don't question about the genocide in Gaza. The public doesn't question. Only minorities are criticizing the fight of the Israeli armed forces in Gaza. And so I come back to the point I mentioned. The German public is sleeping, and they don't recognize those problems in the world. And so this is a mistake, because those problems are our problems as well, and they will reach us as a domestic problem. We have a huge Arabian and Turkish minority in Germany, and under those people, many of those people are living in Berlin, where I live as well, are feeling very angry, but they keep their mouths shut at the moment. And I don't know how long it works.
I see. So the bottom line is that right now, there's not going to be any domestic pressure on Chancellor Merz to change to take any action on some of those words.
No, he's not strong enough. No domestic pressure.
Got it. Okay. Well, that makes sense. I wish it were different, but that's the way it is. That's the reality and the truth. And that's what we're trying to uncover here. So again, we are very, very grateful for having you on today. Really do appreciate having you on, Patrik, and look forward to having you back on again real soon.
Pleasure's on my side.
Thank you very much. And thank you guys. Also to let you know, we got another Patrik Hittingson coming up later this afternoon, where we're going to look in a little bit more detail about Putin's promised retaliation. We just heard some update from President Trump, give a little bit more detail on that phone call. And we're going to be trying to figure out if we can see what may be happening next in that. Join us this afternoon at 2 p.m. on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and we will see you then.